The toys of the 70s that most parents could afford, tacky or great. Those unforgotten toys in the 70s and what price it was. In the 1970s we had our ups and downs, although we remember the decade so fondly, with great memories of the colourful fashions, the flares, platform shoes and the orange coloured deco. Many families still found themselves struggling with keeping the household bills above water and keeping away from the provident loan collector. We had 3-day working weeks and strikes were prominent, but as poor as we were, our parents managed to treat the kids to the toys of the era. Tacky or great, we will remember many of the cheaper, more accessible games and toys of the 1970s. So that is what we're going to talk about today. I've read your comments and people have asked for the more affordable memories that most people were given back in the day. So here we go. The Spirograph. Many would share this creative toy, and it was simple, plastic, and all you needed was a pen and paper. There were plastic circles within circles. They were like cogs with random holes for your pen. You just move around in the circle which was within an outer circle, and your pen would create patterns on the paper. Hard to describe, but many will remember, and there will be sheets of paper all over the place with these creations stuck on doors, fridges and bedroom walls. They didn't create pictures as such, just geometric shapes and different colours if you change pens. The price in the mid-70s was around £2.57. It was invented in the late 1960s, but this was a massive hit for the 1970s child, and it is still on the market today, averaging new at around £15. I have seen a few old ones in charity shops that are quite cheap. Matchbox cars. Now these had been around for years, but in 1970 Matchbox diecast cars started their 175 series with a modernised look, and they introduced Super Kings. The models became slightly bigger than the older sets, and the Super King seems massive at the time. In order to avoid paying copyright, some Matchbox small models were actually made up, particularly in the late 70s. But they were well remembered models, and they were affordable at 50p each in 1975. The Super King model would set you back at an average of £1.25, so they were robust and you could throw them around the room and they'd still be playable. Dinky were more expensive, and Corgi had its own series around the same time and the same price as Matchbox. I don't know, I always preferred Matchbox to Corgi. I wonder what your preferences were. There was also another company making models called Spot On, which was around 1967, so a little earlier. Produced by Triang in Belfast, they were more detailed, hence the name Spot On. These are highly collectible and can fetch a fortune today. And as we all know, we should have kept the boxes. Those cheap plastic friction-powered toys that were popular in the 70s. They never had a brand name of sorts, but all you saw on the box was made in Hong Kong. As a Buzz fan, I used to get these from the local market, and they could break so easily. A simple box with artwork of drawings of a British town, printed in simple colours, mainly a London phone box or a pillar box. These toys kept us entertained for minutes until they fell apart. How to describe friction power? Well, a few cogs in the mechanics that allowed the back wheels to run a little longer than when you pushed it manually. The vehicle would travel along the floor. It didn't travel very far though. You've had to have owned one to understand. But looking at the artwork on the boxes today, I can't help think that it's wonderful. Can you? Look at these. The idea had been around for years, but in the 1970s, after us joining the common market, this brought these toys to Britain in their tons. They cost pennies, and I wonder how many are still around today. Did you ever see an advert on a TV, especially around Christmas, for a toy that you really wanted and ended up with a cheaper imitation from the market stall? I hope I'm not the only one. Instead of Hornby Railway sets, you got Tyco, or instead of Meccano or Lego, you got something called Dibbo creation. Now I wonder if anybody else remembers that creation. I'd love to know if you make it in the comments. Don't get me wrong, cheaper games and knockoffs, as my mother would call them, they were fun to play with, but I would never admit I got those unbranded versions of a fashionable toy. I was never upset. I think many of us kids were more aware of the family purse back in the 1970s, and we really did appreciate what we got. But it's true to say that most of those toys, they didn't last long. Majorette or Husky, I think they were a cheaper version than Dinky or Corgi back then too. Used a bit more plastic. And for Barbie or Cindy doll lovers, there were loads of dolls around with similar names for pennies. Probably headless by Boxing Day, and the cheaper ones didn't even have any knickers on. Aye, what about those toys that our parents enjoyed more than we did? I used to get Airfix models. Only the small ones, but my dad would insist on helping me build them. And then he would just take over and build the whole thing himself. Or you get a game, a family game, and then your family would play them with their visitors while you were at school. Sticklebricks. Sticklebricks was launched in 1969, just ready for Christmas, and in 1970 they were flooding our market. They were the brainchild of Dennis Fisher Toys, the guy that invented Spirograph. Later he sold it to Hasbro. Sticklebricks were for younger kids, and they just stuck together and frankly made nothing useful at all. To be honest, they were tat, weren't they? Cheap at a starting price of around 60p, but they remained in the toy box and hardly saw the light of day. We all got an annual, didn't we? Our favourite comic or magazine came out with a yearly hardback version for just over £1 in 1975, just to get an average price. That's around a tenner today in 2025. The Beezer, the Jackie, the Whizzer and Chips, Marvel annuals, they were endless. Bestsellers of the day were the Dandy, the Bunty and the Beano. We read them over and over again. Many were probably kept in the attic for years. They're all over the car boot sales today, but most of them haven't really valued. The Looking album was my favourite at the time, not forgetting the individual pop star annuals like David Cassidy, the Bay City Rollers and Susie Quattro. Here's another one, not a toy, but for birthdays and Christmas, many of us got a single record of the day because they were cheap, around 49 pence in 1975. Mind you, my sister would buy me a record as a present, but it was always amazing how it was her favourite band, and she used to borrow and play it, and that record never left her bedroom again. What about cheap packets of sweets such as fondants or jellies or chocolate flavour stuff? How many of us got those, eh? Well, they were quite sickly, and it's just as well we never saw the ingredients on the box. Those market stallers had a lot to answer for, eh? Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get back to toys and games. Plastic farm animals, cowboys, horses, soldiers. They were pressed plastic coloured bits that normally arrived in clear bags. You had an assortment of models that you collected and made up your own scenes, such as a farmyard or a military scene or a cowboy ranch. They were misshaped and didn't even stand up without falling over. But they were fun, and some were as cheap as 20 pence for a set. So many kids would cover their bedroom floors with these models, creating movie sets with unbranded figures that we named the characters ourselves. So popular in the 1970s, but upsetting when they were accidentally kicked over or being told to put them away before you went to bed, thus ruining the whole scene. Action Jacks. They were made in Hong Kong. It was a cheap version to Action Man, and if you see the pictures here, you can see there's no comparison to the real thing. Here are a few examples of imitation dolls and figures that were on the market store that really should have had a health and safety inspection. Action Jacks were made with blown plastic and was a Star Products production, whoever they were. The Pet Rock. It's got to be mentioned. This toy, invented in 1975, made the inventor Gary Doll a millionaire. It didn't really make it to the UK. I can't think why. It was a pebble in a box that did absolutely nothing. Can you? It sold in its millions. The idea was no feeding or grooming was necessary, and it would make a perfect pet for kids. Massive in the USA, but alas, Brits never bought into it. A pebble in a box. They say that you can't get blood out of a stone, but costing in UK money around £1.95, they certainly drew a few quid out of it, eh? The cost of it, as I said, would work out around £15.93 in today's money. Still wondering why Brits never bought into it. Apparently, it has been relaunched. I'll keep my eye on the stock market. The idea came when Gary was in a pub chatting to his friends about his pets getting on his nerves. I wonder how many beers he had that night. I've got a few house bricks at home for sale. One of them's called Fluffy, if anybody's interested. Toy kids cap guns. They were massive in the 70s, and although the prices varied, they were basically still very cheap. They grew popular worldwide, and the UK kids loved them. The posh kids would be kitted out in a cowboy outfit, but kids like me, we were just happy to have the toy. They were shaped like old Western movie-style guns, made of metal and had a roll of dots, and when triggered, they would make a bang. Well, sometimes. The rolls of caps were like mini explosives on a paper roll. They made a bang. No house fires, no extinguishers needed. You could buy spares for around 15p, and they were fun. Today they are not banned, but the laws of taking one out and being caught with his toy could get you in hot water due to the restrictions of imitation weapons being frowned upon. Makes sense. Never take one out in the rain. The paper got wet very easy, so they were doomed. I can't wait to hear what some people did with those caps rolls. Tell me in the comments. We all had a cheap sheriff badge as well, didn't we? Mine was plastic. Western films, they were so popular in the 70s, so this toy was bound to be a hit. Compendium sets were another low cost effective toy, especially for Christmas time. How could a parent go wrong? Ludo, snakes and ladders, bingo, tiddlywinks, drafts, and many, many more. Depending on the price that you paid was the quality of this amazing set. The cheap ones just had cardboard and plastic counters. Even the drafts were push-out cardboard circles, and the bingo was just paper dots that you covered your numbers with. Never took long for the pieces to go missing or the cardboard to get creased or bent. Was it hours of entertainment for the family or years of more space in that attic? Everyone, I'm sure, spent at least one Christmas day with one of these sets. And did you win at bingo in your house? You only won the sweets back that you already had for Christmas, and sometimes your parents would win them back off you. I must say it is illegal to gamble under the age of 18. Did our parents think about that when they were winning our gifts back? Now older kids and the family were getting more mature presents, and there was nothing better than all those shaves and those soaps available from Boots. However, our friend in the outdoor market had much more affordable things to offer. Soap on a rope that crumbled and never lathered, matey bubble bath that had no scent, an aftershave like High Karate at 99p, and mock Avon perfumes. To be honest, they weren't that bad. We even had a fake posh pen in a plastic box reading Paper Friend. That's just me playing with words. But remember those pens with the 4 choices of ink colour where you pressed a slide down the side of it? You had 4 little buttons and each button would correspond to a different ink colour. I think they were called Clickerland. Oh, and posh writing paper and envelopes that Mother used to use to write to the council. Plasticine. I'm including this because the 1970s brought us that character Morph on the kids' TV programme Take Heart, presented by the wonderful and gently spoken Jonathan Hart. Plasticine was invented by William Harbert back in 1897 and was used initially for his students to model artwork without the substance going hard, thus remaining pliable enough to be able to use it again. The idea soon caught on as a toy in the early 1900s, and it was sold to kids. The original colours were bland, and in 1975, as an example, a pack was around 20p. I'd say about £1.50 today. The colours became more vibrant and kids loved making models, trying not to mix up the colours at first, but eventually we did. And all those colours would all go into some sort of dirty grey or dirty brown colour, and it would pick up all the household dust. But I do remember that smell that you got from plasticine when you first opened that fresh pack of all those colours all laid out. Petroleum jelly was the smell. I'm going to finish off with Space 1999, the Eagle. I have no idea what it cost when Dinky introduced it in 1975, the same year as the programme hit our screens about Moonbase Alpha with Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. They were fab, and most of us kids had one. I don't think they were pennies, but today they are worth a fortune. Even the battered ones sell, the ones without that little box that used to drop when you press the button. But if you've got one in an original box, then you're talking hundreds of pounds. Space 1999 was a massive 2-season series by ATV. It was about being on the moon, being blasted into space. Those eagles, as called, were very distinctive, and we all loved them, and we would all remember one. Anyway, thank you for those who commented about showing more affordable toys and gifts of the 70s. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to explore and reminisce. Yeah, that's the word. And I hope I've given you some great memories too. Again, please excuse my typos and my dyslexia and my errors. And thank you again so much for watching and for those really kind comments and the memories that you've shared with me. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.